Got it.
Can you, Kyle, can you get my sweatshirt?
No, I put my knees on. It's going.
This way. Stop.
All right, so is it rolling?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hey guys, my name is Benji, and today I'm going to be presenting about something that I'm very passionate about, and I wanted to share with all of you guys too. The presentation is called Hear Me Out, and it's about stuttering. So, a lot of you have probably heard me talk in the past, or are hearing me to talk right now, and you've probably noticed that I speak a little bit differently than most people. So, just to kind of get a general consensus about what all you guys think, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is going on with all this? What do you think is going through my head when I'm stuttering? What should or shouldn't you do or say to someone who stutters? And what causes stuttering? Just kind of any ideas.
Well, I think with anything that's a little different for us, I think you should be respectful about it. And if you're going to ask a question, maybe like formulate it in a way where it's not like, wait, why do you sound so weird or this and this? Because it's like, it's just who you are and stuff like that. So just be respectful, kind of.
I don't know a lot about stuttering, but I'm guessing you can't control it, or maybe you said like, what are you thinking about? Like, I'm sure it's just normal for you now, so you don't really think about it.
I was gonna say, yeah, I also don't really know much about stuttering. I don't know if it's like vocal. Basically, just saying like just relax and like hear whoever is speaking out, like just like wait for them to finish what they're saying.
Maybe something that you should do when you talk to someone stuttering communication.
Yeah, great stuff. So I'm actually going to answer this last question here because it's pretty important to understand for the presentation. So the short answer for what could cause stuttering is we're still trying to figure it out more or less. But there's been some research lately that suggests a genetic link between a couple genes on chromosome 12 to activity in the region of the brain that regulates the formation of words into speech. So that could explain the initial moments of disfluent speech. But the cool part is that what actually makes a stuttering more severe or even noticeable at all in the first place is counterintuitively someone's resistance to stuttering. The more you don't want to stutter, the more you do. So how this works is when someone tries not to stutter, it activates what's called the fight or flight response in the body. Its resistance to stuttering is usually caused by a belief that you shouldn't stutter, by believing that stuttering is bad. It's something that you should hide. It's a sign of weakness, that it stops you from effectively talking. And what this then leads the body to do is to try to push through blocks by kind of muscling your way past the tension by increasing the vocal tension. So this makes the stuttering more severe, which then leads the person to try to not stutter more. And it's this kind of cycle that just spirals out of control. I'm an absolute nerd about stuttering. I could talk about this stuff for hours. I just find it absolutely fascinating. So, and just to give you guys a little taste about all the nerdery involved in this, I have some stuff that I wanted to tell you about with stuttering and all that. So there are 3 million people in the United States who stutter, which is probably a lot more than you would have guessed. Among these people are some who you might have known, such as Samuel L. Jackson, Ed Sheeran, Joe Biden, Emily Blunt, James Earl Jones, Shaquille O'Neal, Steve Harvey, and even Moses, actually. Another cool thing about stuttering is that it's actually not uncommon for people to stutter outside of talking. In fact, it's possible to stutter while writing, while playing music, or even doing sign language. So, and for this next thing, I'm going to need a volunteer from the audience. Sure. Come on up. So, on three, starts saying the Pledge of Allegiance. 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Awesome job. You can sit it back down. As you probably hear, I wasn't stuttering right then. And why this works is there's something in the brain called mirror neurons, which are specialized cells that activate when you see somebody doing an action and subconsciously imitate what they're doing, but don't fully carry out the action yourself. Well, what's going on when someone who stutters listens to someone speaking fluently is their mirror neurons for speaking fluently are firing, but they're also being carried out because you're talking yourself, which effectively makes the person not stutter. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. But sadly now I have to go into the bad stuff portion of this presentation, which is where I talk about how people who stutter are more or less marginalized and not treated as they should be. This all stems from societal ignorance about stuttering. This is a tale as old as time, really. People don't know what stuttering is, what it's caused by, how it works, and all that kind of stuff. And because they don't know, they can't not play into the vicious cycle that I was talking about earlier. They think and act like stuttering is something bad, so something that should be hidden, like it's a disability. And this then prompts people who stutter to think that stuttering is bad, try to hide it, and then it gets more severe, like I was talking about before. To give you some examples that show what society thinks of stuttering as a whole, I have a list of some movies and books right there. The first two examples are movies where stuttering is used as a comedy device. There is a character who stutters, and everybody laughs at them because, you know, they're talking funny. And this, once again, reinforces the idea that stuttering should be hidden. But even worse are the next four examples, in which there is a character who stutters, and as the happy finale ending of the movie, the character stops stuttering. To give you an idea of what this is like, it would be like if there was a movie about somebody who was gay, and as the grandiose, happy finale of the movie where everybody is laughing and crying and hugging each other, the person stops being gay. So, first of all, that's absolutely just not how it works. And second of all, think about what kind of awful message that's sent to the world about stuttering. It's saying that stuttering is so catastrophic and awful that everybody is so happy when somebody figures out how to hide it. Excellent. So, as a result of all this, as Joe Biden says, who's actually stuttering himself, stuttering is the only thing that good people still think it's okay to laugh about. If you think about it, this is absolutely apparent, because could you ever imagine if there was a movie nowadays that used race as a comedy device instead of stuttering? There would be an absolutely massive pushback. And the fact that stuttering isn't given the same treatment really shows how people just don't know how to react. as more or less a cause and effect of societal ignorance about stuttering, there is also a great deal of professional ignorance. There are only 180 certified stuttering speech-language pathologists in America. These are people whose job it is to help people who stutter go through the problems that stuttering poses in life. And if you do the math and compare this to the 3 million people who stutter in the United States, then the numbers just don't line up. There's no way that people who stutter can have access to the help that they need. But what's even worse is that even if somebody does manage to find a speech therapist, odds are the therapy is actually going to do more harm than good. Because ignorance about stuttering is so widespread, even the people whose job it is to know what they're doing, oftentimes don't know what they're doing. This is partially because speech therapy is such a broad field. Speech therapists have to deal with everything from swallowing disorders to stroke speech disorders, everything in between. So they're oftentimes not given adequate training on how to deal with stuttering, and they resort to using completely outdated, ineffective treatments. One of these treatments is called the freeze and fix, in which the speech therapist tells the person who stutters, whenever you're about to stutter, just stop talking, and this time, start talking, except don't stutter. Now, after a while, this starts to look a little something like that, which of course it damages somebody's skills in effectively communicating, which is the whole point of speech therapy. Now this has happened to me personally, quite a lot actually. For example, when I was about 10 years old and I had started stuttering severely, my doctor recommended that I take medication that's used to treat schizophrenia for my stuttering, which of course is just not how it works. The side effects would have been awful. And also around the same time, I went through a lot of speech therapists who didn't know what they were doing, until I found two who actually did, and it completely changed my life. And I'll get to that later. And also, I was offered to try this new gadget called the Speech Easy. The Easy uses the group speech Pledge of Allegiance thing that I was talking about earlier. It's a gadget that sits in your ear, kind of like a hearing aid, and it has a speaker and a microphone that plays back your own voice into your ear to trick your brain into thinking that you're talking in a group. And it more or less makes you stop stuttering. However, this doesn't do anything to treat the negative emotions and responses associated with stuttering, which are the cause of its severity in the first place. In fact, it just reinforces the ideology that stuttering is this curse that you must be cured of by the miracle machine. And the real kicker is that after a couple of months, your brain gets used to talking in a group, and it stops working. And this is absolutely crushing for people who stutter, because you're completely knocked down from this artificial high feeling of thinking that you're finally rid of this burden and you can finally live the life you've always wanted to live, only to have your stuttering be more severe than ever, because the psychological aspects of stuttering have only gotten worse. Yet despite how all of this is a completely known thing, let me show you a little video.
Up. He was taunted and scorned for something he could not control, but in a flash, it went away. How millions could be set free by this genius invention. We'll be right back. Our next story goes to show that big miracles can come in small packages. This little gadget is truly a miracle worker that could change the lives of millions of people around the world. Look at this. 18-year-old Mark Babcock has also never been able to speak without a stutter.
12 years old, being cussed out and being made fun of, and just being called such horrible things.
Lifelong stutterer Mark Babcock is also praying for a miracle. Mark's family holds their breath as they listen to him use the device for the first time.
Easily. And here I am, just talking away. And it's so easy because I can hear myself in here. And of course, all of you can't hear this, but I've got it down here.
Oh, son, you deserve this.
You know, it's really amazing how in this day of modern science and on an issue of affecting millions of people, we're still using witch doctor techniques from the 1500s to treat stuttering. It's just insane.
In a way, how millions could be set free.
All right, so eventually, all this ignorance surrounding stuttering starts to be turned into action, and loads of stereotypes about people who stutter are created. There are stereotypes that people who stutter are nervous because they're always stuttering, that they're shy because a lot of times they won't talk for fear of being made fun of, or for trying to avoid stuttering altogether because at times it can be just so painful. That they're always fearful because they're scared of having to talk and not being able to talk. That they're anxious because all the vocal tension starts to build up over time, or that they're just plain stupid because they can't talk. And eventually people start to act on those stereotypes too. It's very common for people to try to finish the sentences of someone who stutters. This is quite possibly the worst thing you can do, because first of all, it's saying to them that you're doing such an awful job of talking that I'm going to try to talk for you. It's also just plain annoying because they almost never actually get it right, and it also puts a giant time pressure on people who stutter, because they have to say what they want to say, but before the other person has time to interrupt them, which then translates into I can't stutter because that would take too long, which then makes the stuttering more severe, and so on and so forth. And it's also very common for people to just laugh at people who stutter, one, because they don't know what it is and they're trying to make a joke, or two, because they've watched all the movies where stuttering is used as a comedy device. Some tangible and quantifiable effects of this is that people who stutter are 4 times more likely to be bullied in school. There's lots of employment discrimination because people oftentimes won't hire people who stutter because they think that they're stupid. And in tandem with this, they, according to one study, they earn 20.2% less money per hour. Eventually, all the stigma starts to rub off on people who stutter themselves, and they start to internalize that stuttering is bad, that I shouldn't stutter, I should hide it. And they develop what we call in the speech therapy business a gremlin, which is a thought that tells you you can't stutter in a situation. Oh, I think that you
I just moved it.
Move the thing to the left a bit.
Wait, never mind. So, sorry about that. You can go next. I'll leave this slide. Sorry about that. All right. So, altogether, the ignorance, the stigma, the stereotypes, they start to have a giant effect on people who stutter for personal life. It affects their opportunity because they can't talk. They can't do a lot of things where you have to talk, which is almost everything. It also impedes on their success because they get the feeling of, I can't do anything, I can't speak, I can't go anywhere without having to talk, without having to suffer through this. It also just really damages your self-worth because every second of every day you have to walk around with this crushing weight that's saying, why me? What did I do to deserve this curse? Well, why can't I talk? Why can't I make friends? Why can't I participate in school? Well, why can't I go anywhere? Why can't I say anything without people thinking that I'm stupid? Without people making fun of me? Without people listening to what I want to say? Without people hearing me out? And finally, it's just a giant blow to people stutters' mentality on life. Because after a while, it gets pretty hopeless. Because there is really no way out. It's every single second of every single day that you have to talk or you have the possibility of talking. There's not really any option besides just not talking, which sadly is what a lot of people do. All right, phew, we made it through that's a part of the presentation, and now we get to talk about effective therapy and a healthy response to stuttering. So the philosophy of stuttering that I'm talking about with you right now was all created by this guy, Charles Van Riper. Who is pretty much the founding father of speech pathology. Van Riper himself was a very severe stutterer. He went to dozens of speech therapists. Each one didn't help at all. Eventually, things got so bad that he pretended to be a deaf mute, so he wouldn't have to talk. And he even attempted suicide because of his stuttering. But eventually, he made absolutely massive strides in the field of stuttering treatment. He created what's called stuttering modification therapy. What this philosophy entails is that as opposed to trying to stop people from stuttering, it tries instead to counteract the negative emotions and responses associated with stuttering, which are the cause of its severity and the cause of all the negative effects in the first place. Instead of trying to fight against stuttering, you embrace it as part of who you are in order to break that vicious cycle I was talking about. And all this is done by proactively creating an atmosphere where you believe it's okay to stutter, to counteract those gremlins I was talking about. And then once all this psychological mumbo-jumbo is taken care of, you can work on the muscle memory aspects of stuttering by making it less tense and less severe and just more comfortable to deal with. Now, speech techniques are a way to physically enforce and to practice this philosophy I'm talking about. It's a way to teach your mind and your subconscious and your muscle memory to abide by this philosophy. Well, one example of a speech technique is fake stuttering. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory. All you do is stutter on purpose. Now, this may seem completely counterintuitive to some people because the whole point of speech therapy is to stop stuttering, right? But actually, it's completely revolutionary and absolutely genius because it completely turns the tables on the stuttering. Instead of being passive, instead of waiting for a stutter to come to you, you come to the stutter. You stutter on your own terms, out of the grasp of the fight or flight response. So you end up stuttering a lot less tensely because the initiation isn't fueled by this cycle of oppression and tension. In fact, I don't know if you guys have seen me with my hands in my pocket or something like that, or carrying around this little thing right here, but this right here is a tally counter. And whenever I take it pretty much wherever I go. And whenever I'm talking with somebody, I have it in my pocket counting the number of fake stutters I'm doing as a way to motivate me to assess my progress. And I don't know if you can see it from over there, but right now I'm at 232. So pretty much all the stuttering that I've been doing this entire presentation has been fake. You've been fooled.
Wait.
And as you can hear right now, I don't have to stutter. Because if I just don't fake stutter, it's almost the same thing as not stuttering at all. But of course, this means absolutely nothing to me. In fact, I actually almost prefer to stutter, because it's a badge of honor to show what I've been through, and it's also just more in line with my personality and who I am as a person. In fact, I just find speaking without stuttering to be weird. Like, to be honest, I have no idea how you guys do it. Like, you mean to tell me that every time you talk, you're not fighting some internal mental moral struggle? Like, what? You mean that every time you talk, you're not constantly analyzing your psychological and subconscious condition and trying to anticipate what everybody else is going to do every time you speak? Like, what? It just seems like a waste of time. And the positive effects of implementing these speech techniques and this philosophy is absolutely insane. Because if you think about it, the only thing that causes the negative effects of stuttering is your negative reaction to it. So if you fix your reaction or change the way you view stuttering, it completely overrides all the barriers that stuttering places to living fully and freely. And this is absolutely the case for me. When I was 10 years old, as I said before, and I started to stutter severely for the first time, I was absolutely awful about it. I was so scared and nervous and ashamed, and I didn't want anybody to know that I stuttered. I would switch around words all the time whenever I thought that I was going to stutter on them. I wouldn't talk at all for fear of being made fun of and for fear of having to go through that pain. But then everything should change when I found those two speech therapists that I was talking about before. And it's completely just changed the way I live altogether. In fact, now that I'm on the other side of his mental metamorphosis, I realized that stuttering has taught me so much. It's taught me that what I have to say is just too important to let anything stop me. And it's given a new value to everything I do. It's completely amps up my communication skills. Because it takes about, I'd say, 5 times more effort for me to talk than everybody else. And because speaking is so difficult for me, and I'm just so mentally tuned into everything that's going on, I've had to overcompensate, and I can improve on my communication skills so much more than if I didn't stutter. It's also taught me a lot about overcoming challenges, because stuttering has been and continues to be the biggest challenge I've ever faced. And how I see it is, if I can fight this challenge, then I can do just about anything. And it's also taught me a lot about having empathy for other people, because everybody has that one little quirk about them that we hide from other people, that we're scared of letting other people know. And because my little quirk is just so unhideable, it's forced me to have to deal with it. And now I understand to a certain degree what everybody else is going through with their little quirks. One of the most practical applications for what stuttering has taught me is that it is the best personality test ever. If I'm meeting somebody for the first time and I start stuttering and they ignore me or laugh at me or make fun of me or start talking to somebody else when I am in the midst of trying to talk to them, whoosh, out of my life for forever. Because if you think about it, it says so much about who you are that you're being a poop about stuttering. It tells me that you don't care enough about what other people have to say to listen for an extra 5 seconds. It tells me that you're not so sympathetic enough to realize that I am going through something and that you should respond to accommodate me. And 3, it tells me that you're ignorant enough to not know that I am different in a certain way and that you have to respond in a certain way to that. But quite possibly the best gift that stuttering could give me was perseverance. Because how I get through having to deal with this challenge every second of every day is that I realize that it's making me stronger. That every time I have to speak where it's painful, or every time I have to deal with somebody who's making fun of me, it's making me a better person, and I'm going to come out of this better than I was before. And because of all this, I can confidently say that stuttering is the hardest but best thing that has ever happened to me. All right, so now I have a little challenge for all of you, because obviously it's not good enough to leave this idea inside this room. It has to get out there. And one way that I figured out how to do this is through one of those internet challenges, like the ice bucket challenge. So this is the stuttering challenge. The rules are pretty simple. All you gotta do is, if you stutter or if you don't stutter, all the same, when you're ordering your food at a restaurant or a counter, just fake stutter to your server. Taking a video of this is optional, but absolutely encouraged. And then you should challenge somebody else, pass it on. And what I hope that this will accomplish is that it'll increase awareness about stuttering. Because if this takes off and a lot of people start doing it, then it'll become a more commonly talked about topic, and it'll start to peel away at all the ignorance that I was talking about before. Also, I hope that it'll make people have more empathy for people who stutter, because they get to experience a tiny snapshot of what it's like to live with a stutter when your server gives you the face, or says, what are you doing, or says, did you forget your order or something? And but most of all, what I hope that this will accomplish is that it'll desensitize the public to stuttering. It'll show people who stutter that stuttering is so okay that even people who don't stutter are willingly stuttering. And it'll start to peel away at all that stigma and all those gremlins, and the idea that stuttering is this awful, afflicting curse. So hopefully all of you guys are going to be like Bonnie Stinson right there and say challenge accepted. All right, that's all, folks.